Noddy, Noddy, the little man with the red and yellow car. Noddy, Noddy, his tinkling bell means he's the happiest little fellow in all Toyland. There's Biggies and Tubby and Mr. Plod and all his special friends. It's sixpence an adventure, then he'll take you home again. Noddy, 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 Noddy.
Noddy and the Naughty Tale.
It was going to be another busy day in Toyland. Noddy was having breakfast when someone whistled outside his door. "Come in," Noddy called, and in came Bert Monkey. His long tail swished about in front of him and waved at Noddy.
"Good morning, Noddy,"
said Bert.
"I need your help."
"Well, you can help me by looking after your tail," said Noddy. Bert's tail had crept onto the table and taken the lid from the teapot. Bert tugged his tail away and stuffed it into his pocket. Then he told Noddy,
"I went to see my grandma and she gave me a pencil box, but it hadn't got a rubber in it and I really wanted one."
"Bert," cried Noddy,
"it's your tail again."
The naughty tail had sneaked out of Bert's pocket and was trying to grab Noddy's toast.
"Tail," said Bert, "give Noddy back his breakfast."
His tail dropped the toast and slithered away.
"It was my tail that got me a rubber," said Bert. "It found a really big one at my grandma's and slipped it in my pocket. But Noddy, it's a magic rubber. It can rub out anything. It could rub a hole in your carpet. It could even rub out your teapot."
"Then don't bring it here," said Noddy. "I'm having enough trouble with your tail. Give the magic rubber back to your grandma." But Bert couldn't give the magic rubber back because he'd already sold the pencil box to Sam Skittle.
"Please help me get it,"
pleaded Bert.
"All the Skittle family are going to the seaside today. We must catch them before their train leaves the station."
"That rubber sounds dangerous," said Noddy. "We must go straight away. Leave my marmalade, please, you naughty tail." Bert's tail never liked being told off, so he'd put Noddy's marmalade pot straight back on the table. Noddy drove Bert to the station in his little car. They saw Sally Skittle and her children hurrying towards the platform, but then Bert's tail sneaked round Noddy's back, over his shoulder, and in front of his eyes. Noddy braked quickly, but before the car could stop, it bumped into Sally Skittle. She tumbled into young Sam Skittle, who tumbled into one of his sisters, and then all the Skittle children tumbled into each other and rolled about on the ground, shrieking and giggling. It was a good thing the Skittles simply loved to be knocked over.
"Thanks, Noddy,"
giggled Sam Skittle. "That was good fun."
"Sam,"
said Bert,
"I need the rubber from that pencil box. Have you used it?"
"Oh, no," said Sam. "I've got lots of rubbers. I gave it to Clockwork Mouse."
"Oh, dear,"
cried Bert.
"Now we've got to find Clockwork Mouse."
"It's market day today," said Noddy. "He's sure to be there." When Noddy drove his little car into the market square, it was full of noise and bustle, but he soon spotted Clockwork Mouse running up and down, peering at all the stalls.
"Clockwork Mouse,"
called Noddy. Clockwork Mouse didn't hear him.
"Clockwork Mouse,"
called Bert. Clockwork Mouse didn't hear him either. Then Bert's tail sneaked out of the car and tapped Clockwork Mouse on the shoulder. The mouse jumped and squeaked in alarm.
"Clockwork Mouse,"
said Noddy,
"it's important that Bert Monkey has the rubber Sam Skittle gave you. Give it back, please." "No, I won't,"
squeaked Clockwork Mouse.
"It kept falling through holes in my pockets."
Bert said the rubber had probably rubbed out those holes.
"Don't be silly,"
laughed the mouse.
"You'd need a magic rubber to do that." Bumpy Dog picked it up and ran off with it.
"Oh, no," groaned Noddy. "We'll have to find him now. He's usually with Tessie Bear." As Noddy and Bert set off to look for Tessie Bear, Clockwork Mouse pranced along behind them, laughing.
You've got a very silly tail, Bert Monkey.
Bert's tail sneaked along the pavement and snatched Clockwork Mouse's ankle. The mouse squeaked with surprise as he found himself sitting down very hard indeed. Noddy and Bert Monkey rushed about the town until they found Tessie Bear eating ice creams at the cafe with Mrs. Tubby Bear.
Oh, Tessie,
panted Noddy.
why isn't Bumpy Dog with you?
Oh, because he's at my house, said Mrs. Tubby Bear. He's playing with Master Tubby while I'm out shopping. They were having a fine time throwing a rubber about.
That's Bert's rubber,
cried Noddy.
he needs it.
Noddy hurried off to find the rubber, and Bert followed. But Tessie Bear called him back.
Please may I have my ice cream?
She said.
Sorry,
said Bert. He took the ice cream away from his naughty tail and gave it back to Tessie. When Noddy and Bert arrived at Mrs. Tubby Bear's house, Noddy raced up to the front door and turned the handle, but he ran straight into the door. It hadn't opened at all.
Ouch,
he said. Rubbing his nose, Noddy peered through a window. He saw an upside-down chair blocking the door.
Bumpy Dog must have knocked that chair over.
Bumpy Dog was leaping eagerly round Master Tubby, who was very busily rubbing out part of a carpet.
Look,
cried Bert.
there are holes everywhere.
There were holes in pots, holes in plates, holes in tables, and holes in chairs. There were even holes in walls, and through those holes Noddy could see Mrs. Tubby Bear's garden. He tapped on the window and told Master Tubby to stop using the magic rubber.
No, I won't,
shouted Master Tubby.
I like it. It's mine.
And he rubbed a hole in a cushion. Then he rubbed out the chair that was blocking the front door.
Look, Bert,
said Noddy.
we can get in now.
They rushed into the house.
That's my rubber,
Bert told Master Tubby.
You must give it to me.
And his tail wrapped itself round Master Tubby.
No, it shan't,
said Master Tubby, and rubbed out the tip of Bert's tail.
Oh, good,
thought Noddy.
That naughty tail's one thing he can rub out.
Master Tubby was running backwards so fast from Bert and Noddy that he didn't notice Bumpy Dog just behind him. Master Tubby tumbled over Bumpy Dog with a great thump. The rubber flew out of his hand and landed neatly in Noddy's hand.
Now then,
said Noddy, marching up to Master Tubby.
What shall I rub out first, your nose or your mouth?
But Master Tubby Bear didn't want to be rubbed out. He ran upstairs and hid under his bed. Bert flopped in a chair. He didn't notice that Noddy was rubbing out the rest of his tail.
What will Mrs. Tubby Bear say when she sees all the holes in her house?
Wondered Noddy.
I know,
cried Bert, leaping up.
I'll ask my grandma for a come-back spell. You must be very quick, Bert,
Noddy shouted after him.
Don't let that tail slow you down. I won't,
called Bert.
Haven't you noticed? My tail is suddenly being very good indeed.
Noddy laughed as he watched Bert running off with no tail. He laughed so hard that his head nodded and the bell on his hat rang and rang until Bert was out of sight.
Noddy and the pouring rain.
It was a rainy morning in Toyland. What a horrid day, said Noddy grumpily as he sat in his car. Bop, bop, said his car grumpily as it sat in a puddle. Big Ears splashed up the road carrying 2 umbrellas. He called,
Wait! I was so worried you might catch a cold in the rain, so I've come to lend you my old umbrella.
Noddy was still grumpy. It's going to be very awkward, he grumbled, driving round with an old umbrella. Big Ears told Noddy he shouldn't be grumpy. He should smile and say,
Thank you, Big Ears.
So Noddy said, "Thank you, Big Ears," and set off to look for passengers. He hadn't driven very far when Martha Monkey shouted to him. "Noddy! Noddy!" she called. "I want you to take me to the station," she said, as she climbed into the car. "If you like, I'll hold that umbrella for you." "Thank you," said Noddy, as he gave it to Martha. "This is cosy," she said, holding it over herself. "I'm sure it is," muttered Noddy, "but I'm getting wet now." When they arrived at the railway station, Martha Monkey told Noddy to come back at 5 o'clock and take her home again. "Don't you dare be late," she snapped. "I hate rainy days," grumbled Noddy. "They make everyone grumpy." But then he heard a cheery voice. "Hello, Noddy. I'm so pleased to see you." It was Mrs. Tubby Bear, who'd come up to the car with young Master Tubby. "It'd be lovely if you'd drive us home." Noddy cheered up. "Of course I will," he smiled. "You can keep dry under Big Ear's lovely old umbrella." As they drove into town, Noddy held the umbrella over Mrs. Tubby Bear. But Master Tubby, sitting behind them, was feeling naughty. First he wiggled the umbrella about. Then he pushed it right over Noddy's eyes so he couldn't see where he was going. The car wobbled back and forth across the road, then crashed into a pillar box. The pillar box tumbled over and, with a terrible rumble, rolled off down the street, scattering the passers-by. When Jumbo the elephant tried to run away, he charged into the fruit stall. The stall collapsed. Apples, oranges, lemons and peaches all rolled along the street. The Skittle children were thrilled when they saw the fruit rolling towards them. They dashed in front of it, laughing as it knocked them all down. "Hoo-hoo, what fun!" they giggled. "Hoo-hoo, we love being knocked down." Mr. Plod, the policeman, was standing outside the police station. And he was not pleased.
"What's this noise?"
he muttered, as the pillar box rumbled and thundered towards him.
"Oh, my word!"
he cried when he saw it was about to thump into him. It crashed into his legs and knocked him flat. Noddy had followed the pillar box, and he pulled up just as Mr. Plod was struggling to his feet.
"Now then, Noddy,"
asked Mr. Plod,
"what do you know about this?"
"It wasn't my fault," cried Noddy. "No," said Mrs. Tubby Bear, "it really wasn't Noddy's fault." "It was Big Ear's old umbrella's fault," said Noddy. I couldn't see, and then that pillar box bumped into my car."
"Ah, ah," said Mr. Plod. "That sounds like dangerous driving to me. For one whole day, Noddy, you must not drive that car."
"Oh, no," wailed Noddy. "I need my car."
"I shall keep it in the police station,"
Mr. Plod told him. Noddy was so upset that he just grabbed Big Ear's old umbrella and ran away. His car was upset too. Just as Mrs. Tubby Bear and Master Tubby tried to climb out, it went bop, bop, and raced off through the town, taking no notice of Mr. Plod, who was shouting after it,
"Where are you going? That's not the way to my police station."
A little later, Big Ears walked up the path to Noddy's house. It had stopped raining, and he wondered whether Noddy might have come home with his umbrella. Just as he was about to knock on the front door, he was amazed to see Noddy's little car drive up the road with Mrs. Tubby Bear and Master Tubby Bear, but no Noddy.
"Where's Noddy?"
he called. Mrs. Tubby was a bit breathless.
"Oh, his car's come to look for him," she said, "but I'm afraid he's run away. Who knows where he is?"
Even Noddy didn't really know where he was. He was trudging along the road to the railway station, but he was so busy moaning to Big Ear's umbrella, he wasn't looking where he was going.
"It wasn't my fault," he moaned. "I didn't mean to knock the pillar box down. It was all that rain, and you silly old umbrella. Ouch!"
Noddy said ouch, because he'd trudged into the station, onto the platform, and straight into the railway engine.
What's the matter, Noddy?
Called the train driver. When Noddy told him of all the trouble he'd had that rainy morning, the driver was very kind. He said Noddy could spend all day helping at the station. He could be a porter. Noddy was thrilled. He had a fine time carrying bags, pushing trolleys, opening carriage doors, closing them again, and yelling, "All aboard! All aboard!" The time went so quickly, it took Noddy quite by surprise when the last train pulled into the station. It was 5 o'clock, and there was Martha Monkey tapping him on the shoulder and saying, "Come along, Noddy. I've been waiting for nearly a minute." I'm sorry, Martha," said Noddy. "I can't take you home. I'm not allowed to drive my car today." "Oh, really, Noddy?" said Martha. "What use is a taxi driver who's not allowed to drive?" "I'm a porter today," he said. "I can carry your basket." Noddy carried Martha's basket out of the station, where Mr. Sparks was waiting with his car. He was delighted to see Noddy.
Everybody's been so worried about you, he cried, since we heard you were missing. I've had to drive everybody to the station and back. Now I can drive you. Quick, jump into my car. Mrs. Tubby Bear's baked a special apple pie to cheer you up.
"Oh, good," said Martha. "Hurry up, Noddy. We must get back to your house for tea right away."
Big Ears will be thrilled, said Mr. Sparks as they drove off. He's been walking everywhere, looking for you.
Of course, Mr. Sparks wasn't to know that, at that very moment, Big Ears had arrived at the station looking for Noddy.
Oh, Noddy must be so miserable,
he thought, as he sat on the platform and rubbed his aching feet. Back at Noddy's house, all his friends were delighted to see him and pleased that he'd had such a happy day. As the last crumbs of Mrs. Tubby Bear's apple pie were being licked up, there was a knock at the door. On the step was Big Ears, exhausted. "Big Ears!" cried Noddy. "I'm sorry you've been so worried."
Oh, never mind, said his old friend. I'll soon feel better if I can have a piece of Mrs. Tubby Bear's apple pie.
"Oh, dear," said Noddy. "We've eaten it all up. Still, at least you can have your old umbrella back. We've had a lovely day together, and I'm not grumpy anymore. Look!" He hugged the umbrella and nodded his head up and down as Big Ears sat on a stool and rubbed his aching feet. The bell on Noddy's hat rang and rang.
Noddy and Martha Monkey.
It had been a messy day in Toyland. Noddy and his car were tired and dirty from helping Farmer Straw in his fields. "Oh dear," yawned Noddy. "I'm so tired. But I must wash my little car before the mud sets all hard." He wiped a soapy sponge across the bonnet of his car, but with every wipe of the sponge he got more and more sleepy. His head nodded closer and closer to the bonnet. He yawned. His eyes closed. His head dropped gently onto the car, and he was asleep. But not for long. Up the road danced Martha Monkey. "Hello, Noddy," she called. Her voice woke Noddy. He wasn't at all pleased to see Martha. "Go away. You can see I'm busy." But Martha didn't go away. She pranced round Noddy as he sponged his car. "Ooh, what a very dirty car," she giggled. "Fancy getting in such a mess. You must give its face a good scrub, and mind you wash behind its ears." She ran off, giggling and laughing, leaving Noddy feeling even more tired. His eyes were closing again as Master Tubby Bear peered over the fence. He'd seen how dirty the car was and wanted to wash it, but Noddy said he'd probably do something naughty.
No, I won't, cried Master Tubby. Oh, please, Noddy, let me wash your car. I promise to be good.
Noddy was so tired he did let Master Tubby wash his car after all. He went into his house for a slice of ginger cake, but as soon as he sat at the table, he fell fast asleep. Next morning, Noddy was feeling better, and his little car gleamed in the sunlight. He jumped in and pressed the starter. But the car simply coughed and jerked forward a few inches. Noddy tried again, but again the car coughed and barely moved at all.
What's wrong?
Said Noddy.
What's happened?
Just then Big Ears arrived to ask Noddy to take him shopping.
Big Ears, said Noddy, something dreadful has happened to my car.
And he showed Big Ears how the car coughed and jumped.
Oh, that car has got hiccups,
said Big Ears.
Have you put something fizzy in the petrol tank?
No, I haven't,
said Noddy.
But that naughty Tubby Bear washed my car. Perhaps he may have done.
They looked inside Noddy's garage, and Big Ears was surprised to see a crate of empty ginger beer bottles.
I was saving them for your birthday,
Noddy explained.
Oh, that's very kind of you, said Big Ears, though I don't know what I should do with empty ginger beer bottles.
They were full,
cried Noddy.
I was going to give you ginger beer. What's happened to it?
Big Ears said,
I think Master Tubby Bear put it into your car's petrol tank. That's why it's got hiccups.
They heard a wail from over the fence. It was Master Tubby Bear.
I only gave the car a drink. It was thirsty. It wanted a drink.
When Big Ears had helped Noddy push his car to Mr. Sparks's garage, Mr. Sparks shook his head. Big Ears shook his head too.
Oh, please stop shaking your heads, cried Noddy. Can you mend my car, please?
It'll have to stay here while I clean it out, said Mr. Sparks.
But I shan't earn anything, cried Noddy. Then I won't be able to pay you.
Big Ears had an idea.
I'll lend you my bicycle, he said. If we tie my wooden cart behind it, you'll be able to deliver all kinds of things.
Noddy was very grateful, and Mr. Sparks had a job for him right away.
You can go to the station and fetch my 2 new tyres.
Noddy could have hugged them both, but he didn't because they had oil on their hands, so he just hugged himself instead. Noddy collected the bicycle and cart from Big Ear's toadstool house, and soon he was at the railway station. There he piled Mr. Sparks's tyres onto the cart and pedalled off up the road.
Oh, this is very hard work, he thought. These tyres are so heavy.
Noddy didn't know that the tyres were wobbling about on top of the cart, and every time he cycled round a bend or bumped over a lump in the road, they got even wobblier. As he puffed and panted along, Noddy was rather cross to hear a cheery cry of,
"Hello, Noddy!"
It was Martha Monkey. She was sitting on a gate and laughing at his hard work.
"What's happened to your car?"
she giggled.
"Is it sick? Have you had to put it to bed with a hot water bottle?" "I'm carrying these tyres for Mr. Sparks," grunted Noddy. "And I'm not talking to you." "Oh, yes, you are," cried Martha. "I just heard you."
Noddy wouldn't listen to her, so he didn't hear when she tried to warn him that one of the tyres was almost falling off the cart. And he didn't hear her when the cart bumped over a stone and she tried to tell him the tyre had toppled to the ground. In fact, with only one tyre to pull, Noddy suddenly felt much stronger and pedalled away as fast as he could.
"What a silly nodding person he is," thought Martha. "I'll take this tyre to Mr. Sparks myself."
She stood the tyre up straight, then rolled it along the road towards the town.
"Ooh, what a great game!" giggled Martha.
But when she bowled the tyre over the little bridge that leads into town, it started to roll faster and faster. Martha had to run very hard to keep up with it. Soon the tyre got away and raced out of control through the streets, making shoppers jump out of its way with cries of alarm. It rolled right round Dinah Doll's stall in the market square, scattering her customers and leaving poor Mr. Wobbly Man wobbling and spinning till he felt quite dizzy. Martha Monkey stopped in the middle of the square, trying to see the runaway tyre, when suddenly it appeared from behind Dinah's stall and chased her off towards Mr. Sparks's garage. When Noddy had reached the garage, he was upset and amazed to find he'd only got one tyre in his cart. Mr. Sparks was upset too. "You must have lost it, Noddy," he said. "I'm afraid you'll have to pay for it."
"But I still haven't earned any money," cried Noddy. "And I still can't pay you for mending my car."
Then they both heard a shout.
"Noddy! Noddy!"
yelled Martha Monkey as she raced into the garage and hid behind a petrol pump.
"I've got your tyre! It's chasing me!"
The tyre rolled gently into view. It wiggled 2 or 3 times and then flopped to the ground in front of Noddy and Mr. Sparks.
"Well done, both of you,"
said Mr. Sparks.
"You shall each have 6pence for bringing my tyres."
"Oh, thank you, Mr. Sparks,"
cried Noddy, nodding his head with delight.
"Martha, that was clever of you." "Yes, I know it was,"
said Martha as she crept from behind the petrol pump. But Noddy didn't hear her. He was nodding so hard that all he could hear was the bell on his hat, ringing and ringing and ringing.
Noddy and the Kite.
The wind was blowing very hard in Toyland. Noddy was struggling to peg his tablecloth onto the washing line, but it would much rather flap about all over the garden. He just managed to hold it in place when an extra gust of wind blew it over his head. "Oh, do stop playing about," he muttered. But every time he reached up to place the cloth on the line, the wind blew again, and the cloth drove him up and down the garden like a sailing boat. "Hello, Noddy," called Tessie Bear as he voyaged across the lawn for the 3rd time. Tessie had a basket full of eggs and asked Noddy to take her to the farm gate so she could leave the eggs on Mr. Straw's milk churn for the milkman to pick up and sell. "Of course I'll take you," panted Noddy as he sailed round a flower bed. As soon as I've hung up my washing." "I'll help you," said Tessie. Together, she and Noddy soon finished pegging out the washing. Then Noddy had an idea. "It's such a lovely windy day," he said. "We could take a picnic and fly my kite in Mr. Straw's field." They put the kite and a picnic basket into Noddy's car and drove off into the countryside. As soon as Tessie had put her eggs on top of Mr. Straw's milk churn, she climbed over the gate. Noddy's kite was ready. "Hurry, Tessie," said Noddy. "The kite's longing to fly. It'll pull so hard we'll both have to hold the string." Tessie held on to the string and Noddy let the kite go. "Whee!" they both cried as the kite rushed away from them and climbed into the air. It danced joyfully around in the wind and seemed to fly right up to the clouds. "Look out, Kite," warned Noddy. "You'll bump your head." As they watched the kite bound about in the sky, Noddy and Tessie felt hungry. "We'll tie the string to something heavy," said Noddy. "Then the kite won't be able to fly away." "Noddy, you are clever," said Tessie. Noddy smiled proudly. "We can tie it to the milk churn." Tessie and Noddy watched the kite dance above them as they ate their picnic. Soon they were full and a bit sleepy. But just as their eyelids were starting to droop, a sudden gust of wind blew the lid of the picnic basket shut with a thump. They sat up. "Oh, Tessie, look!" cried Noddy, pointing towards the gate. In the powerful wind, the milk churn was being tugged by the string. It rocked back and forth on its stand. Noddy raced across the field, but too late. The milk churn, with the eggs still on top, took off. It flew high above the hedgerows. "Come down!" yelled Noddy, shaking his fist at the flying milk churn. "How dare you fly away with Tessie's eggs?" As the churn flitted higher and higher over treetops and hillocks, Noddy and Tessie jumped into the little car. They drove quickly along the lanes, trying to follow the milk churn. Soon it had disappeared. Where could it be? That afternoon, the market square was very busy. Everybody seemed to be out shopping. Mr. Tubby Bear was just admiring the goods on Dinah Doll's stall when he felt a spot of rain. Dinah Doll held her hand out but felt nothing. "It's not raining over here," she said. All her other customers held their hands out. Mr. Wobbly Man could feel rain, but Jumbo the elephant couldn't. "I don't believe it's raining at all," said Dinah. But Mr. Tubby was sure it was, and pointed to a puddle. Mr. Wobbly Man noticed something strange about the puddle.
"Woohoo! It's a white puddle," he said.
Everybody gasped and stared and muttered to each other. Mr. Tubby Bear had made his mind up.
"That looks like milk to me,"
he said. Jumbo tested the puddle with his trunk.
It tastes like milk,"
he said.
"It must be raining milk,"
said Mr. Wobbly Man. He looked up into the sky, and all of a sudden an egg smashed on his head and sent him wobbling.
"Woohoo! Someone's dropped an egg on my head."
Jumbo roared with laughter. Then an egg landed on his head. It cracked, and yolk rolled all down his trunk. Mr. Plod the policeman walked up to Jumbo. He didn't notice the egg that dripped onto his shiny boots.
"Now then, what's going on here?"
he wanted to know.
"I'm afraid I have to report," said Mr. Tubby Bear, "that it's raining eggs and milk." "Raining eggs and milk?"
chuckled Mr. Plod as he moved on.
"What nonsense! Eggs and milk! Whatever next?" "Whoa!"
He said "whoa!" because his legs had slid from under him and he'd fallen to the ground. He'd slipped on a broken egg.
This is very serious,"
he decided. Just then, the milkman arrived and reported a milk churn missing from Mr. Straw's farm gate. It was the only churn he'd got, so Mr. Straw was offering a reward of £1 for anyone who found it. Noddy and Tessie Bear were sitting sadly beside a country road. They thought the eggs and milk churn had gone forever. But then something hard landed on Noddy's head. It bounced into his arms. It was Tessie's egg basket. Their mouths had just fallen open in surprise when they heard a clang nearby. The milk churn had dropped onto the road. Tessie rushed up to the churn. "We must take it back to Mr. Straw," she said. "No," said Noddy. "That churn's lost property. We must take it to Mr. Plod first. He can give it back to Mr. Straw. Mr. Straw can tell Mr. Plod how angry he is. Mr. Plod can tell me. But I shan't tell you." Tessie said how brave and kind he was. Noddy smiled proudly. At the police station, Mr. Plod was announcing a reward of £1 for information about the shower of milk and eggs, when Noddy and Tessie drove up with Mr. Straw's milk churn in the back of the car.
"Oh, there's a reward for that,"
said Mr. Plod.
"Where did you find it?"
Noddy explained how it had fallen from the sky after it had gone flying off with his kite and Tessie's eggs.
"Oh, thank you. There's a reward for that information,"
chuckled Mr. Plod.
"The milk churn and the eggs must have flown over the market square."
He laughed.
And that's why we had the rain of milk and eggs. And why Mr. Plod slipped up on an egg.
Laughed Jumbo.
Yes, yes, it wasn't all that funny,
Said Mr. Plod seriously.
Someone could have been hurt.
But Noddy was still giggling.
Tessie and I are going to get 2 rewards.
I don't know about that, young man,
Said Mr. Plod.
You must take that milk churn back to Mr. Straw and pay him for all the milk he's lost.
Yes, all right, I will. But we'll still have 1 reward.
Noddy giggled.
And I shall buy Tessie lots of ice cream.
He was so happy, his head started nodding. It nodded faster and faster until the bell on his hat rang so loudly it could be heard all over town.
Noddy's new friend.
It was a quiet day in Toyland, and Noddy was driving around looking for something exciting to do. Mr. Plod stepped in front of his car, holding up his hand.
"Stop," he said. "I have to move my traffic cones. I put them in the street so I could direct all the caravans from Bink's circus around the town."
A circus? Cried Noddy. Now that is exciting. Can I follow the caravans?
"If you must,"
said Mr. Plod, clearing the last cone. Noddy drove for some way, but there were still no caravans. Then he saw a funny-looking person with a floppy hat, long ears and brown fur, sitting by the side of the road, saying,
"Ow, ow, ow!" "What's the matter?" asked Noddy. I fell from a caravan," said the creature. "I hurt my leg. Ow!" "What are you?" asked Noddy. "Do you belong to the circus?" "I'm a bunkie," was the answer. "Half a monkey and half a bunny. Can't you see my rabbit ears?" Noddy had no idea there was such a creature, but he helped the bunkie to his feet. "Shall I drive after the circus?" "No!" cried the bunkie. "I don't want to go back to the circus. Please, they were horrid to me. Nobody wants me there." Noddy felt sorry for his new friend and said the bunkie could stay at his house until his leg was better. The bunkie loved Noddy's house and wanted to repay his kindness. "I'll clean your house from top to bottom. I'll cook your dinner. I'll wash and polish your car. I'll weed your garden. I'll do your shopping." "Good gracious," said Noddy. "You needn't do all that." "Oh, please," cried the bunkie. So Noddy let him. Next morning the bunkie's leg was better, and he polished Noddy's car until it gleamed. He'd just finished when Tessie Bear arrived and asked Noddy to take her into town. "Noddy's been very kind to me," said the bunkie. "I really want to help him. If you're his friend, I want to help you too. When you want anything at all, just tell me, and I'll do it for you." Tessie couldn't think of anything, but the bunkie was so keen to be helpful, she thought again. "Well," she said, "I wish we had a lamp-post outside our house. Every night my Uncle Bear bumps into the tree by our front gate and goes, 'Ouch!' That wakes us up." "A lamp-post? Aha!" murmured the bunkie. And as Noddy and Tessie drove off to town, it was his turn to think hard. Next morning, the bunkie kept yawning as he made Noddy his boiled egg. There was a knock at the front door, and Mr. Plod strode in.
"Noddy,"
said Mr. Plod crossly,
"do you know anything about 4 missing lamp-posts? Last night, one went from outside Miss Pink Cat's gate, and one from outside my gate, and we both heard the noise of a car."
"Well, it wasn't my car," cried Noddy. "I didn't take those lamp-posts. Please go away, Mr. Plod. My egg's going cold." The bunkie jumped up from his chair and marched up to Mr. Plod. "Yes, go away." He was about to bite Mr. Plod's nose when Tessie Bear ran in through the front door. Noddy, she cried, there are 4 lampposts in our front garden. Wherever did... Oh, hello, Mr. Plod.
So, that's where those lampposts have gone,
said Mr. Plod.
Noddy, you'll hear from me again.
He strode out, and the bunkie pranced after him, making faces.
Horrid fellow! I should have knocked his helmet off.
Noddy had something to ask.
Bunkie, those lampposts, surely you didn't...
But the bunkie dashed out, saying he had to weed the garden.
Oh, he must have done it, Tessie,
said Noddy.
He collected all those lampposts in my car last night to light up your garden.
The bunkie was weeding so fast that Noddy had to dodge flying weeds as he tried to demand the truth. Then Bumpy Dog leapt over the wall. He was thrilled to see Noddy, and bounded up to him so eagerly that he knocked him into the flower bed.
"How dare you attack my friend?"
yelled the bunkie. Then he picked up a clod of earth and hurled it at Bumpy Dog. Before Noddy could explain that Bumpy Dog belonged to Tessie and was his friend too, the bunkie and the dog leapt at each other. They battled all over Noddy's garden. They hurled earth about, they uprooted some flowers and bashed the rest to the ground. They both landed on the garden seat at the same time and smashed it into 2. Plants and grass flew all about as Noddy finally caught Bumpy Dog.
"You stupid dog!"
he raged.
"And you're as bad, Bunkie. You spoilt my flowers and broken my seat. You ruined my garden." "I'm sorry. Please forgive me,"
wailed the bunkie, racing off down the road.
"I'll put your garden right again. I'm sorry."
When Noddy arrived home later that day, Tessie Bear was waiting for him with a flower in a pot.
"Oh, that's so kind, Tessie,"
said Noddy.
"Let's go straight out and put it in my garden."
When they walked around the side of the house, they had a great shock. Noddy's garden was beautiful again. All the flower beds were neat and tidy and full of plants. There was even a garden seat. Noddy stared at it.
"That's not a garden seat," he said. "That's a park bench. It's that bunkie again. He must have stolen that bench and all the flowers. Where is he?"
The bunkie crept out from behind the seat.
I didn't steal them," he whined. "The park keeper said they belong to everybody. That means they're yours, so I brought them home for you."
Noddy was cross with him for causing so much trouble. He made him get in his car and drove him to the police station to own up to Mr. Plod about the lampposts and the park bench. Mr. Plod was standing outside his station, reading a letter and looking very serious. As Noddy's car pulled up, he looked straight at the bunkie.
"Aha," he said. "The very creature."
"This is Bunkie," said Noddy, climbing out of the car. "He's half a bunny and half a monkey."
"Oh, no," said Mr. Plod. "He is all monkey."
He reached out to the bunkie's hat and whipped it from his head. The rabbit ears came with it. They were sewn onto the hat. Noddy and Tessie Bear gasped with astonishment. Then Mr. Plod explained that he'd just had a letter from the circus warning him about the naughty monkey. They'd had enough of his tricky, mischievous ways and thrown him out of their caravan. But the bunkie had sneaked into the driving seat of Noddy's car, and he drove away before the others could reach him.
"Come back!"
yelled Noddy.
"He's taken my car!"
Noddy and Tessie trudged up the road to Noddy's house. From the garage they heard, "Pop, pop!" The bunkie had brought Noddy's car back home.
"He'd only borrowed your car," said Tessie, "because he was frightened of Mr. Plod. Oh, he really was a monkey, but I liked him." "I liked him," laughed Noddy. "I hope he's got a new disguise."
Up on the roof, a furry brown figure wearing a headdress of flowers from Noddy's garden and a skirt made from grass and flowers, watched Noddy and Tessie walk round to the garden. Then the flunky swung across the roof and down the wall. In the garden, Noddy laughed so much about his friend's tricks that the bell on his hat began to ring. As the flunky ran down the road, he could still hear the bell ring and ring and ring.
Noddy, the little man with the red and yellow car. Noddy, his tinkling bell means he's the happiest little fellow in all Toyland. There's Biggies and Tubby and Mr. Plod and all his special friends. It's sixpence an adventure, then he'll take you home again. And now it's time for Noddy to wave and say goodbye. He's tired and sleepy and nodding his head. He's ready to curl himself up in bed and see what tomorrow brings. For Noddy, Noddy, Noddy.